Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Pamela Karanova. Really looking forward to our conversation today, Pamela.
Thank you so much, Simon. I'm honored to be here.
Yeah. So we're doing this healing series, and thanks for coming back on the show to kind of riff about healing with me. What does healing mean to you, Pamela?
I would say healing for me has been really acknowledging that my healing journey is going to be specific to me. I described my healing and other people's healing kind of as unique as our own fingerprints. What works for me might not work for other people, vice versa. So for me, it was acknowledging that it's probably going to look different for me. I seem to have adapted more to outside of the box type of healing measures. And one of the biggest things for healing for me was learning to be able to sit with myself. I spent 27 years drinking alcohol to run from the reality of my adoption story and experience. And I got to a place where it was very, very evident that I was basically like at a war within myself. I literally was at war within myself. And I got sick and tired of, feeling that way. And I really deeply wanted to be able to heal and figure out a pathway that worked for me. But I had to have, put on a hat of persistence and a hat of going inward and getting to know all of these feelings I had run from my whole entire life because, adoption creates really, really, really big feelings. And drinking for 27 years, I, number one, never learned how to process or sit with my feelings, but I also was just avoiding dealing with that truth. So for me, healing meant I spent a decade not using substances, alcohol or anything, so that I could really, really sit with my pain and process it and learn how to process it in healthy ways. Part of the journey is 5 years ago, I felt like I was going to die from a broken heart from my adoption story. And there was nothing anyone could tell me that would let me believe otherwise, that, this broken heart and this sadness was just going to be with me forever. I had to come to the acceptance that I'm in charge of my own healing. Like nobody's going to knock on my door and say, hey, it's time to come outside and heal now. So I put my healing journey in the hands of myself. I went inward and I started to do the deep healing work, by sitting with my feelings, putting all of them on the table. And another pivotal piece of that is accepting that the way that I feel, all of these feelings are perfectly normal for what is not normal, and that's adoption. And knowing that the feelings that I have are valid and legit, and there's nothing wrong with me, even though every day of my life it's felt like there is. But I, was acting and creating a life that was perfectly in alignment for the experience of adoption. So that is kind of what healing is to me. It's kind of going inward, making the choice to take control over my life. I decided that did not um, I did not want adoption to be what takes me out of the world, and it actually has tried to take me out of the world many times over. So that's kind of what my healing journey has looked like. Really making a choice that I was going to take back everything that was taken from me, and I would totally be happy to share what that means.
Yeah. Wow. There's so much there. You talked about being at war with yourself.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, were you at war with your feelings as well?
Oh, everything. I mean, I was at war with everything. I was at war with myself inside because I was never settled in knowing who I was and where I came from. I describe it as a mental torment. And then, being told to be thankful and grateful. And, my biggest loss was my adopted parents' biggest blessing. Like, it's hard to make sense of that inside. And it's been that way ever since I was a child. And what that created for me personally was a very deep internal sense of self-hate. I mean, I lived my life where I hated looking in the mirror at what was looking back at me. And that was the majority of all of my teenage years and a big piece of my adulthood. I would say at least 40 years of my 49 years. So that part of not being settled is just really, really, really big. And it did create a war within myself. And when there's a war within myself, then I'm at war with everyone else in the world. Like, I can't be peaceful and, have a happy life when I'm at war with myself, and it came out in really ugly ways.
Yeah.
So,
So the way that you saw the world was a reflection of the inner trauma.
yes, definitely. Definitely, I could say that. Yep. And it's we know, but for those that don't, there's really very rarely any resources for adoptees to navigate these feelings. A lot of us don't figure it out until adulthood because we're not only left in the dark, our adopted parents are left in the dark. A lot of times they aren't even equipped to handle or know how to handle these type of situations that come about. And we know that the agencies and adoption attorneys aren't going to disclose this side of adoption. They keep it hush hush for very good reasons. To them, very good reasons. Money, money, money. Let's be honest. But anyway, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with that.
So, it is the kind. Do you think the rejection of your feelings started with the total and utter contradiction between how you felt and how your adopted parents felt? Was it the contradiction between those that made you want to fight your feelings?
Yes, it was part of that contradiction, but there's this sense of, the being grateful and being thankful and all of that, the gaslighting that is involved, because I was being thankful and grateful really shouldn't even have been in any of these conversations. The very few that we did have was my adopted mom was grateful and loved my birth mother for her sacrifice and giving me away so she could be a mother. And in my mind, I'm just like, who is this lady? Where is she? I wanted to say that I loved her, but I couldn't because it might hurt my adopted mother's feelings. So I call it being like tongue-tied from a very early age, where I was feeling all these feelings, but I couldn't let them come out of my mouth. There was a block there. And a lot of it is conditioning. A lot of it was because my specific adoption journey was really more about my adopted parents becoming parents, even though they couldn't parent, than it was ever about me and providing me with a safe, loving home. So all of us have different stories. That's my story. But yeah,
Yeah.
not sure.
How much do you think we kind of underestimate, as adoptees, underestimate the parent stuff versus underestimate the adoptive parent stuff, and kind of it's a loaded question, so maybe I should ask it in a more neutral way. Do you think that we underestimate the role of the adoptive parents in looking at our trauma? So or do you think we get it about right? I mean, I don't even know if I'm asking a very good, clever question here.
That's actually one of the topics that I would love to have a chat about. I think that there are some adoptive parents that legitimately just do not know. Like they are completely in the dark. They have no idea what they're signing up for. And to be completely honest, with my time getting to know adoptive parents over the years, that's the majority of them. I mean, that is the majority of them. They feel very ill-equipped on how to handle and navigate these experiences. That's why one of the reasons it's so important for adoptees to keep sharing their stories and their voices, because even the ones that maybe at one time didn't have the willingness to understand, they're starting to open up to the idea of understanding that, wow, maybe we didn't know everything that we thought we knew. I think it's very, it's a big thing happening in adoptions now, where adopted parents really have no idea what they're doing or how to parent these children. I think there's huge missing links. I like to think that they want to know. I hope they want to know. And if they haven't ever wanted to know, I really, really encourage them to open up to listening and learning. Um, because adoptees are dying. Like they are dying because this pain is so great and they don't know what to do with it. And there is not help. Um, even adoption therapists sometimes don't fully understand the wounds. Adoptee therapists definitely do. So yeah, I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done in all the areas of adoption, but adopted parents not grasping or understanding or knowing. Some of them are in their own little bubbles and they've been sold a dream by these agencies, and they start having a child that, starts acting out or having issues. And I was labeled just an ornery teenager. I was just a troubled teen. Nobody connected the dots on adoption. And I was in therapy my whole entire life.
Yeah.
There comes a point in time that we have to step out of denial about adoption and how big it is and how impactful it is to every single person that's adopted. And adopted parents have a role in that. They have a part in that. They are responsible parties in this. Doing major research before you even complete the adoption transaction should be happening. So yeah, there's huge missing links, and you know there's just a lot of work to be done when it comes to adopted parents. But I really, in my experience over the last probably 2 to 3 years, I'm coming across a lot more that are open to the idea of, wow, I actually do need to really focus on learning more and connecting with other adoptees and opening up to maybe I don't know it all.
Yeah. What's coming to my, well, loads of things are coming to my mind. The main thing I think is about grace. If we can give our adopted parents grace, and I'm not doing that because I think they have done a great job. I'm saying that because I'm thinking, well, Nancy Verrier, who was kind of the first person that ushered in the change, right? Or put a metaphor, put a theory to what was going on. She didn't actually write that book until 1993, right? So like I was adopted in 1967, you were adopted. I'm guessing you adopted in the 70s sometime, were you?
Yeah. I was 74.
74. So that's almost 20 years before this issue was really at the forefront. I mean, there's no excuse now.
Right.
There's no excuse now because it's so done. Also, another metaphor that came to my mind is that the person, if the person selling you the car never says to a 17-year-old buying a car, they never say, well, do you know the statistics about how many 17-year-olds get involved in car wrecks? They don't do that, do they? They don't.
Right.
A person at point of sale, at point of transaction, they don't want to say anything that's going to put the buyer off
Right. And
by
that's
the
exactly what's
purchase.
happening with adoption. If they say anything that's real about the reality of this, it could affect their point of sale.
Yeah,
That's exactly
that's
right.
what it is.
You're exactly right. Yep.
So, what do you think? What do you think helps us heal? I mean, you mentioned adoptee therapists, and I'm thinking there's this great resource. It's a state by state directory of adoptees who do therapy. So
Yeah.
I'll put that link in the show notes. That's from Chaitra, who's been on the show. She's an adoptee and a therapist. She's also an adopted mum. But what so therapy clearly is one of those things that helps us heal, and but as long as they know what kind of know what they're doing. Have you ever been gaslit by a therapist?
Uh, I honestly not a therapist because the majority of my life, adoption was never brought up, was never talked about. So it was not a topic that we were putting on the table. So for them to gaslight me about adoption, that would mean we have to talk about adoption. Now, in the last, I would say 10 years, since I did spend 10 years, alcohol free and saw a few therapists in that time, it wasn't as much gaslighting from the therapist as it was me therapying the therapist.
Yeah,
And that is absolutely pointless for me. So therapy in my world, it has not been effective for adoption, and I'm 49. I just started seeing a new therapist for EMDR. I have great um, outlook as far as my future in the EMDR because I've heard 100% positive experiences from adoptees and actually anyone that's used EMDR for trauma. So I'm hopeful that EMDR is going to help me with my trauma. Not now, the therapist facilitating it, I'm pretty sure he doesn't really know all of the stuff that he should know about adoption. Nothing to him. It's just not taught. He's not an adoptee. I'm basically using him for EMDR therapy. And that's, something that I'm hopeful will help me for that. But I don't think any therapist have gaslit me. Adopted parents, yes, definitely.
yeah. So it's an error of omission then, but as in the therapists haven't talked about adoption. It's not a gaslighting thing. I actually
Right.
I have felt gaslit. If I look back on an experience about 8 years ago, I was doing basically what I saw as a due diligence uh, conversation, asking some due diligence questions as I was
Mm-hmm.
talking to a particular therapist that I could use. And in my mind, there's no doubt that the therapist actually gaslit me in terms of questioning my questions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So why are you at? There was a level of frostiness. I don't.
Mm-hmm.
There was a level of prickliness on her part as to why I was asking these questions, and they were um, pretty simple questions, such as what will our process look like.
Right.
So that's why I ask it. But we've got to be sure that the people that we are doing people that we're working with know what they're doing, and that we're comfortable with them. And I've just started some. I've had loads and loads of coaching in my life. I've only had maybe 8 hours perhaps of therapy. That was a few years ago, but I've bit the bullet, and now I'm seeing a therapist, and we've been doing some EMDR and body work as well, which is shifting things for me. Very much that focus on the kind of the internal stuff and the feelings in my body. So
Right.
you talked about a recognition that your healing is unique, and you've been finding some unique you found you off the wall, I think was the word that you used. Was that the word? Yeah, there's some slightly different thing. What is it that you think that those things that you've done have oh,
It.
Pamela is dog sitting for her daughter's dog. So we just had to, and she did warn me that asked me if I could edit stuff out. I said I can't edit, but I can actually pause the recording if the dog starts barking. So that's what we did. But this is real life, people.
Yeah.
I didn't ask a very. I asked a rather clumsy question. So for me, there's the difference between the action, so the strategy. So if we just say therapy is a strategy, or listening to podcasts is a strategy, or reading books by other adoptees, that's a strategy. What is it that makes those strategies work or not?
I guess for each individual person, like what seems to be benefiting them versus what is not. Like I tried all kinds of things that was like, that's definitely not it. Um, one of them for me was organized religion. That kept me stuck by the practice of spiritual bypassing, where I was praying to God to take my pain away, but no matter what I did, how much I prayed, how much I served in the church, how much I fasted, I was still brokenhearted, and I was left gaslit by religious organizations that there is something wrong with me because I didn't receive the healing that I should have. And so that's adding another layer of badness to the bad I already feel. So that was one that I tried it for a really long time. It didn't work. I had to kind of walk off into the sunset and figure out what did work for me. Um, one of them was accepting. One of the biggest, most pivotal things that I can share from my healing journey is coming to the realization that grief is literally something I'm going to be dealing with for the rest of my life, the grief process. And acknowledging and validating for myself, because nobody else was going to do it, that a lot of what I've been feeling, I would say 90%, if not 95, of the pain I've felt my whole life from adoption is actually me grieving. It came out as substance use disorder. It came out as anger and rage. It came out as self-sabotaging behaviors. But now that I'm at a more sound place of processing my journey, I can, without a shadow of a doubt, say I've literally been grieving since the minute I came out of the womb. And nobody has ever acknowledged this grief for me. If you look up on the internet what prolonged grief does, a lot of times in the adoption community, it's considered complex grief, which it is, because it's for long periods of time. Anyone that's separated from their birth mother is going to start grieving from the minute of that separation. And some of us start grieving in the womb because we're rejected by our birth mothers. I was one of those. I was rejected by my birth mother in the womb and as soon as she had me. And I know that a lot of people want to say, oh, well, she would have kept you. She had choices, or, not all birth mothers actually wanted to keep their babies. Some of them did want to get rid of that problem. And I was one of those adoptees. So I had to connect the dots, almost like doing a dot to dot as we were kids, connecting the dots on all of like, oh my gosh, I've been grieving every day of my life. And I actually had to allow myself the space to realize that grief is not, I'm just not going to wake up one day and just be gone. This is going to be a lifelong visitor. Okay, I accepted this. Now what am I going to do with it? I am going to research grief as much as possible so that I can give myself grace when I start having these big feelings that seem to come up 2 to 3 months before my birthday, every single holiday, anytime I see people walking down the street and I look at their facial features and their skin tone, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that must be a mother and a daughter, or that's a father and a son, or seeing all kinds of different scenarios on the television, which I don't watch much of because it's so triggering. I allow myself those feelings, and I have aligned that with the grief process. And I think that if there's any way that anyone can tap into that being an adopted person, and then stepping into the space that grief may or may not be, not for everyone, but for me, I feel like it's going to be a lifelong visitor, and kind of becoming an expert at grief and what grief looks like for me and what helps me get through those episodes and those seasons of sadness that, that seem to come and go. It's like ebb and flow. Um, the other thing is when I'm in the middle of those really sad, grief filled moments, reminding myself that I'm going through it. I'm going through this. I'm not getting stuck here. And then a lot of times, my feelings in those moments are actually tied to pre-verbal memories and, you know, memories that are coming out in my subconscious memory that people think babies are blank slates, but our bodies know what happened to us, and we are still very much connected to our birth mothers, even though we've been separated. So our body feels things at a much different rate than people that have not been separated from their birth mothers. So these are some of the things that helped me. I did, realize when I made this realization that grief is going to be a lifelong visitor, and I needed to accept that it was going to be a lifelong visitor. I'm not going to wake up one day and be healed in Jesus' name. Not for me. Now, other people, maybe it worked. It didn't work for me. I had to step out of denial and into that space. And it's like all of these chains fell off of me that kept me captive. And I was like, wow, almost like if you could picture flowers blooming and the sun coming out and like this beautiful field or garden. Like, as soon as I realized, okay, I'm not crazy, my feelings are very normal for spending a lifetime being gaslit and told how to feel. And the trauma of separation, the trauma of our adoptive homes, for some of us, they're traumatic. And all of the ways I feel are perfectly normal. What's not normal is all of these things that adoptees have to go through just to survive. So that was a huge, huge, huge pivotal healing moment for me to realize that I'm okay. I am okay. My feelings are normal for a not normal situation. And I need to become an expert on how to process these feelings and go through the grief process, because it's like I had to almost make it my best friend and really get to know it. And I've never framed it that way, but it's really true, because the grief for me has been so deep and profound and, heartbreaking. But now, about 5 years into making that realization of grief is going to be here forever and what that process looks like for me, and kind of becoming as influential with talking about grief, writing about grief, as possible, so that other adoptees start to get the message that I really think that you might want to consider the grief process and what that looks like. We have every adoptee that is separated from their birth mother has been grieving from the minute that separation happened, if not sooner.
Yeah.
And we need to look at that. We need to talk about it. We need to realize that that's a big, big, big thing. And 5 years into me coming to this realization and accepting it, I literally feel like my broken heart is healed. I'm not going to die from a broken heart. And I've been able to kind of do a dance with the grief. We dance and we ebb and we flow, and we do life together. And it sucks having to accommodate your whole life around how you're going to survive adoption grief. But I think if everybody put on this hat of investigating that avenue, Eve, especially our adopted parents, before they adopt a child, we need to start talking about grief, because they have a lot of grief of their own that they need to work through before they ever adopt a child.
Yeah.
A lot of them do. So,
Wow. So, have you come across that Kubler-Ross curve in your grief, in looking at grief? Have you heard? Is that she's called Elizabeth Kubler-Ross? Is that ringing any
it
bells?
is she the one with the 5 steps to
Yeah, it's
grief?
like it's shaped a little bit like a horseshoe. The, the,
Well, I know I've heard of that and I've read some of it. What I have actually gravitated to that makes more sense to me, which it kind of removes all the boxes that those steps put into play, is the grief recovery method. And I actually just received a grant to become a grief recovery method certified trainer, to be able to host grief groups. Of course, my groups or my connections that I will foster is basically specific to the adoptee experience, because I feel like grief is such a pivotal role in our healing journeys. The grief recovery method, it kind of debunks all of those 5 steps in ways
oh,
that they like put you in boxes with those steps, because everyone's healing journey and grief journey is different, right?
interesting.
So it kind of opens it up to, yeah, that's probably, I mean, they've been around for a long time,
Yeah,
but the grief recovery method, I personally feel like has progressed beyond that. That's a little bit outdated, and you learn about all of that when you get into their materials. But I write about it all the time, where I encourage adoptive parents to become professionals at grief before they adopt children or when their children are babies, so they can help them process grief as early as possible.
yeah. So listeners might like to check out the Kubler-Ross curve and the grief recovery method and see which one feels right for
Makes
them, or
better
see which
sense.
bits of uh, I. It sounds to me as if you're defining healing as the acceptance of our feelings and grief in particular.
Yes, definitely.
Has I'm just because I'm we use these terms like healing, and we just brush over them. I feel, and that's why we're going deep on this within the podcast. But like who like, if somebody had ever said to me, right, well, healing. Oh, let's make it even simpler. Healing is accepting grief. It's like, oh, right. So any strategy that I'm doing is leading to one goal in the moment, right? In each moment, that and obviously at some points we're going to be fighting the grief, and
Mhm.
then we're going to be fighting, accepting. It's almost to me like a high wire act,
Mhm.
like a high
It's
wire act
definitely
of
a,
peace.
yeah, I describe it as walking a tightrope and jumping off and decided I didn't want to play this game anymore.
Yeah. Um, and I think for me, it's almost like it comes in. One face is one one phase ends when we first fall and realize that the net catches us, right?
Right.
So that's phase one, which is a discrete event, and the rest of our lives is the fine tuning, is the processing. It's like we until anybody's pointed out, I'm thinking of it's a strange thing. I'm thinking of a business analogy, right? So I spent a lot of years afraid of failure in business, and I never pulled the plug. And after 26 years, I pulled the plug on something, or something failed. It was an absolute failure. I felt at that time, and it didn't it didn't lead to me. Well, yeah, it didn't lead to the end of me, right?
Right. And that's a wonderful thing.
But it's seeing it for the first time,
Yeah.
and seeing that you've seen it, and knowing that the safety net has caught you,
Right.
and then when you go back up on the high wire, you're not as scared of falling anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're on the high wire, you never actually perfectly upright. You're always, you've got the bar, the long bar out.
Mm-hmm.
You're always adjusting.
Mm-hmm.
Or your own, yeah. It's a constant. Yeah, it's a constant tweaking and processing, and that sounds like really hard work, but
Yeah, and it
maybe
is
that's
hard
what
work. It is. But I feel like once you master a lot of it, then you're more equipped to handle it when it happens. I think one of the pivotal things that would be beneficial, so it's not such a big, huge event that happens in adulthood, is if we start talking about loss in childhood of adopted children. If we start acknowledging that they have lost anything to begin with, I find a lot of denial in that area, or, um, you know, just creating this fantasy that these adopted children are blank slates. And a lot of times I've heard it out of their mouths that adopted parents want to protect the adoptee from their truth because the truth is so devastating and heartbreaking and all of this. But the reality is we can't heal if we don't know what we're healing from. I can't heal from a question mark. Like I can't heal from what ifs, maybes. Like I can't heal from that. So acknowledging and accepting that before any child is ever adopted, they've experienced a very significant trauma first is a key component to stepping down a pathway of helping that adopted child grieve as early as possible. Well, my adopted child doesn't have any issues with being adopted, say them all. Well, I had every issue with being adopted, but none of them could come out of my mouth because I was gaslit and I could never tap into my real feelings because no one ever created an open environment for me to do that. Now, adopted parents, if they're doing the research and investigating and listening to adoptee voices, they can, hear a lot of adoptees talking about books, that help facilitate these really hard conversations. And I think if I was grieving at 5 and 6 and 7 years old, one of the things I always wished was said was somebody facilitate the conversation that it's okay for me to be really sad that I lost my birth mother. It's okay for me to be mad that I lost my birth mother. It's okay for me to love her. Why can I never say out of my mouth the words, I love my birth mother? Why can I never say that? Why can I not say that I'm brokenhearted that I lost her? Why do I have to pretend my whole life? This needs to stop. Like it really needs to stop. And I think that adopted parents are wanting to do the right thing, like the grace that you were talking about. Now I do my best to give them grace because I've learned over the trajectory of the years I've been involved in the adoptee community that a lot of them just don't know. The ones I don't have grace for are the ones that have the unwillingness to try to learn. They just know it all. And I don't have time for those conversations because it's not even a conversation that's going to be received. It's rejected, obviously. So I think that is a really important and life or death component, is adopted parents realizing that we have lost our whole entire world before they adopted us, and it deserves recognition. We deserve to be able to grieve our losses, and we're not going to find the language ourselves. They have to facilitate that language for us, which means they need to become professionals at the grief process. Like, research it, look it up. Children's grief, there's all kinds of stuff on the internet on how to help adopted children grieve. Um, and I think that that is really life or death, like I said.
So we're healing. We're not healing from a question mark. We're healing from grief. So what do you think gets in the way? What hinders our healing as adoptees?
I would say really denying adoptees the right to grieve or be sad or have feelings. Our society has been very pro-adoption. And the same people that are pro-adoption, really, a lot of them have no idea what it's like being an adopted person. Unless they're adopted themselves, they do. But we need to open up difficult conversations, save space for grief and loss for adoptees, do everything in their power. Non-adoptees should do everything in their power to help adoptees get their truth, because the truth is ultimately the pathway to healing, you know, and I think that's really beneficial. Connecting with other adoptees is, a beneficial thing where we speak the same language. Um, Really acknowledging that all adoptees are at different places of their personal journey. I was stuck in the anger, rage-filled stage for many, many, many years. But I was stuck in that phase and stage of my life because no one was listening to me. And I had this lifetime of anger and rage pent up from the minute I found out I was adopted. And the only way it would come out is anger and rage. And there wasn't one person in my life that was trying to get to the bottom of it. The therapists weren't even getting to the bottom of adoption. But realizing when you come across an angry or rage-filled adoptee, they're hurting inside. They probably haven't been listened to or validated. Their feelings and experiences have not been heard. And the more we can hear and listen to adoptees and let them get it off their chest, it might be 100,000 times that they say the same thing. I was that adoptee. I kept regurgitating the same story over and over and over. And it started to get lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter every time I shared it, because people were finally listening to me and I felt heard and validated. So, when we heal, then we put on a hat of trying to help other adoptees heal. I could say, oh, I'm healed now. I'm just riding off into the sunset, going to climb mountains and live my best life. That's what I could do. Or I could say, I can't say that my way is the only way, but I can say that I was, brokenhearted, thinking I was going to die from a broken heart, angry, rage filled, and now I have stepped into a space of peacefulness within myself. For me, that was the overall goal, was to find peace within myself. In order for me to do that, I had to be by myself. I spent a lot of my life alone, being by myself, trying to map this out and figure it out, learning to love myself so that I could better love other people. People can help us do that by listening with the intention of understanding, adoptees, and remove the rose-colored glasses that, adoption is just all a wonderful thing. It can be, but as you see, a lot of us are spending our entire lives trying to heal from something that we didn't ask for. We didn't sign any paperwork. So it's kind of a tough one to know that at the end of my life, I'm going to be spending well over half my life trying to recover from adoption. That, that for me was a whole nother acceptance thing. That's just my life's work. Like my life's work is going to come from this wound.
Yeah.
And that's, it's it sucks and it's good because like I want to keep helping adoptees try to find their way out of the darkness, because adoption, if you don't have the tools or the resources or the connections or the truth, it is a very, very, very dark, dark place to be in. And I just, have used this whole lifetime of pain and try to share a story of being able to find the light, even though the darkness tried to kill me.
Yeah. There's an incredible mixture of kind of external stuff um, and internal stuff. So what and I'm interested in how you see the relationship between those two parts. So on one hand, you're talking about being heard, right? Being heard by other people, and it seems to me that that was step by step that has helped you unstick what there must be a better word than unstick. Sorry, but you were stuck in the anger, but then bit by bit, being heard, the anger dissipated, shall we say? Uh, so there's that external part about being heard, but there's this internal part of taking control and all about the internal bit. And I'm wondering how you see the relationship between the external and the internal.
Um, I would say, I mean, the internal dialogue that I carried with myself and had with myself was a direct reflection of how I treated people in the world, and how I loved people. And so getting to a place of understanding myself, has taken a long, 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 long time of research and sitting in the trenches with my feelings that were so big they smothered me. Learning the inside came first for me. And once that shell started to be cracked of me doing the internal work, sitting with myself, being sober and really feeling the feelings, um, was, the start of it all. I had to make that intentional decision that I wanted to find the happiness in life that everyone else was talking about, that I couldn't feel. I couldn't feel that happiness. And so that shift in kind of being sick and tired of being sick and tired, insanity, doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results. I had to be the one to make that shift. And after I'd started working on the internal, dialogue and wounds and the mother wounds times three, and rejection from both birth parents and abusive adoptive homes that I grew up in. There was a lot of madness to work through, and one of the kickers in this healing recovery journey that I've learned is saving space for the hard work, but also we have to find the things we like and love in life and mix them in with the hard work. I notice a lot of times when we come out of the fog, I know I came out of the fog and I was like, consumed in adoption everything because I felt so validated and so heard and so just like a euphoric. Finally, I have something to latch onto that makes me feel like validated, but I was forgetting to incorporate self-care in that. What does self-care look like for each of us is also going to be different, hobbies and fun things. And I intentionally set off to go find what worked for me in the self-care arena because we all need those tools in our arsenal so that when we have what I call an episode or a grief, offset of feeling really sad or bad or whatever, I can acknowledge my feelings, welcome them, sit with them, but now I'm going off to nature to connect with Mother Nature, which is where my safe place is, So we all have to really focus on the inward, getting to know yourself and love yourself despite adoption, Then you add adoption to it and getting to know and love those parts of ourselves on the inside, and realizing, what happened to us is not all of who we are. It's a piece of us. It's a piece of us. And then I think the outward stuff comes once we can tap into that, because, you know, it's intentional every day that you get up and say, I'm going to go for a walk 1 hour every day because it makes me feel good. Find the things that make you feel good and add those to your arsenal of self-care tools to kind of intermingle in with trauma work and EMDR and grieving. And, I think consecutively putting those all together is definitely way more beneficial than just going head into all the grief and the loss and the trauma, and now you're totally consumed in it, and it's way too much for anyone to bear all by itself. We have to take breaks. We have to tune into our internal dialogue of what our bodies and our hearts and our minds are telling ourselves about what we're doing. Like, is this making me feel good or bad? Is this, and I'm not talking about sitting in the feelings of sadness. Those are not great feelings to have, but every Mother's Day, I'm going to boo-hoo and cry at the loss of my birth mother. I'm going to cry at the loss of who I wished my adopted mother was, but she wasn't. She couldn't care for me. And I have had to grieve every step of the way. I've even grieved what my birth mother looked like. It was the biggest disappointment of my life. I pictured her to be this beautiful woman that was from Hollywood or something. Like, our minds are so, into these fantasies because we don't know. And when I saw her and she opened the door, like, my whole entire spirit just was on the floor. Like, I almost wanted to cry in front of her because she didn't look anything like what I pictured my whole life. And I know that that sounds awful, but to me, it's one of the biggest disappointments of my life. Like, people don't realize that the secrets and the half truths and the lies set us up for these big, huge disappointments that are soul crushing. And then to be rejected by her after one time of meeting, like, just being able to sit with all those feelings and welcome them and understand and know that I'm not crazy for feeling this way. It's sad that nobody really has written a book that this is how adoptees can heal. This is how they can recover. I will share a really important part of my journey is spending 10 years on the sober bandwagon, alcohol free. I am now, I spent 10 years working on the trauma. I have gifted myself with the ability to recover, where I feel like I've recovered. I'm nobody in any recovery program that I've ever been involved with has ever given me any kind of notion that I can actually recover. And so I knew in my heart of hearts, all the way back to being 15 years old, locked in drug and alcohol rehab, that alcohol wasn't even the biggest problem. What was the biggest problem was why I was drinking to begin with, the root issues of separation trauma. So when I spent 10 years sober working on all of that, one day I'm like, I'm going to share with the people that I'm close to that I feel like more recovered than I ever have. And now I've kind of graduated to having a healthy relationship with alcohol, which isn't a big one because now I love living life sober from alcohol. Like, it's just, once in a blue moon, I'll drink here or there, or have champagne or a glass of wine, but it's more of a healthy relationship. And so that's something I've never heard anyone else doing. I kind of had to gift it to myself. So I'm sharing that piece because sometimes we have to create what works for us, and nobody's going to hand us the roadmap for it. And nobody's going to say, this is how you have to do it. You have to figure out how you're going to do it. And it's going to look different for everybody, so.
It's going to look different. I think the pathway is going to look different. And maybe even the end result is going to look different.
Right.
Accepting our feelings is one way that really sums up to me what healing is. And it's like you said something earlier on, and I'm not sure what it was, but it reminded me of a godfather moment, and something about keep your friends close, but your enemies closer, right? So it's like bringing, come on, grief, bring it on,
Yeah.
bring it in. I'm not
Yeah.
afraid of you anymore. You talked
Right.
about grief as a visitor.
Mm-hmm.
Grief is going to be a is going to be a visitor in your life forever. I think that's what
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
said. So
That's what I've accepted.
you're not trying to kick him out.
No, I mean, he's coming no matter whether I can try to kick him out, but like every time the holidays roll around, or I mean, I don't even have to list all the things
Yeah,
because most adoptees, I mean, they already know because they live it, but grief is a big part. Like the loss, I mean, our whole entire being and existence is rooted in loss before adoption ever even happens. And I really, really, really wish if anyone can take any away from this whole conversation, we have to separate the two.
yeah,
The separation from our birth mother is different than adoption because I think a lot of times adopted parents feel very threatened by all of these conversations and big feelings and all of that. And what I would like for them to know is they're separate. They're separate. Like adoption trauma or being adopted is after the separation trauma. And the separation trauma carries a big, enormous weight of its own, where the adoption trauma or the adoption experience carries totally separate experiences. So learning to just not be so threatened by it, as far as that goes on their end. Um, if we're being realistic, every adoptee begins their story with loss, and pretending like it doesn't exist is very, very harmful. And the sooner we can address that and start the grieving process, it can be having your adopted kids, draw a heart and put it in a little box for their birth mother. And let's write a little poem that we'll give her one day, or be sad that we lost her. It can be a variety of a million different things, but the sooner that grief process happens, I think, the better.
yeah. The thing about grief is that I'm thinking about other grief moments, not moments, deaths. The
Mm-hmm.
death of somebody
Mm-hmm.
close to us, and grief. And nobody tells the grieved person to get over it, do they?
I mean, actually, I mean, rightfully they shouldn't, but people do that. They a lot of times the grief process is something that is facilitated for us to do in isolation. We live in a society, whether it be adoption or not adoption, that's pro positivity, the positive culture. And we haven't saved space for people that are grieving, even if they lose someone in an accident or whatnot. But I have heard people kind of be insensitive. And I think that society at large just hasn't been taught how to help people process grief the most effectively. And I think there's a lot of missing links and missing information. That's one of the things that my future, moving forward, I intend to go pretty hard on, is the grief process
Yeah,
in adoption, because my adopted mother never grieved her losses either. And my whole entire childhood was a total tragic nightmare based on her not grieving her losses of having her own biological children. So grief needs to be really highlighted in adoption, and we haven't been very good at accepting people that are grieving, but even more so in adoption because it's really only seen as a win-win, positive light, and people haven't saved space for it. So,
yeah. Wow. Is there anything you'd like to share that I've not asked you about, Pamela?
um, I I think I've covered pretty much everything. I would say that one of the things that I encourage all adoptees to do is to create their own path, whatever that looks like for them. And I had to come to the acceptance that I didn't sign up for this and I don't owe anyone anything. What I owe myself is the space to try to recover. I will be healing for the rest of my life. I will be grieving for the rest of my life. And accepting that has been the biggest game changer in my journey. I spent a long time just wanting to be healed without doing the work. I had to do the work. I am in charge of my own healing. We all are. And getting to know and love yourself from within is just really a key component, and finding the things that you like and love to do, and then mix that in with becoming a grief expert on your own loss and allowing yourself the space to grieve freely whenever, wherever, however. And hopefully all the people that know and love you will come alongside of you and help you facilitate that process with, because they love you. They should want to. And I believe in my heart of hearts that adopted parents love their children. This is a really hard thing to stumble upon of, wow, so I'm supposed to help my 5-year-old grieve when they seem like they're perfectly happy. I mean, that's a whole thing. That's a whole thing. But I am here to tell you, as a 49-year-old adult adoptee, I did not start grieving till I turned in my 40s, like early 40s. And if I could have facilitated that process much earlier and younger and started being incorporated into the language to find those words, I feel like I probably would have went down a totally different path than I did in my lifetime. So anyway, yeah, that's really, really all I have to say. And I'm really honored to be able to share what I have today. And hopefully it provides another level of understanding, for anyone that cares to listen.
Fantastic. I just wanted to underline something that you said there. You said that you'd felt that you wanted to be healed without doing the work, and that was you can see that now. I'm just wondering when you came out of the fog and it all became you had all this validation and stuff. Validation, and you felt you were being heard, and this became all encompassing. Did that was that a step in the process to healing, or did that change? Did you get stuck? Did you get stuck at that point?
I think I was stuck for a really long time, and stuck until I started to connect with other adoptees in person through my Adoptees Connect group. And online, I was connecting with other adoptees, because when you connect with other adoptees, online or in person, these little light bulbs go off. You listen to what they're saying and you're like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, connect, oh my gosh. It's kind of like it helped escalate me out of the fog. And the more I shared my feelings, the more I could get out of that's been pent up for so long, which every time I shared something, it was another step towards healing. That's why when I say, adoptees, I've heard about them, and I was a stuck adoptee, like, just listen. Like, all they need is for us to listen, and not judge them for their anger, their rage. I'm not saying, them being destructive physically or harming physically. I'm not saying any of that, but I'm just saying that it's a process for all of us to unleash all of these big feelings we've had our whole lives. And for us to not have safe places to share them is what's created a disconnect of us finding happiness and peace within. Because, in order to be validated and heard, like, you have to have someone on the receiving end. And a lot of times, unless we're connecting with other adoptees, we don't have that. I have never once had a conversation at depths with my adopted parents how adoption has made me feel. They have never asked. They have never wanted to hear anything about my failed reunions. They are on the happy narrative of these are two totally separate lives, and my birth family is none of their bit. Like, it's got nothing to do with them. They've never acted like they cared about that part of my life. And it left me feeling very split between the middle of two worlds, which ultimately pushed me out of both worlds. I'm just over here by myself with my kids because I can't deny certain parts of myself just to make them comfortable. And, I ended up legally changing my last name and I moved across the country and started my life over. I encourage all adoptees to do whatever they have to do to find themselves and to find happiness within themselves. I felt like I couldn't, that tightrope that I was talking about, like straddled on two different sides of the fence of adoptive versus biological. We don't have shared history with our biological family, and we a lot of times aren't connected to our adoptive family. Some of us, yes, but being in that paradox of stuck somewhere in the middle is just something that I threw in the white towel. I didn't want to be a part of it anymore because it was too difficult for me to have to separate myself in my life, and my feelings and things that were really important to me from these different sides of families that I didn't really feel like I belonged in either of them anyway. So I just came and I made my own life. And that's what's worked for me. It's hard. I mean, it's hard to live in a city with no family support. And I raised twins and a 4-year-old into adulthood as a single parent with no family support. And we did it, like we made it. But I was just very determined to spend the rest of my life taking back what was taken from me. I celebrate my birthday the whole month of August now because August 13th has stolen my happy birthday, the day I was born, for my whole life. And now I'm like, you know what? August 13th, it can happen. It was there. Like it was the worst day of my life, losing my birth mother. And it showed its ugly head every year at my birthday. But now August is my birthday. I celebrate every day of the month and I'm taking back all the birthdays I lost. And so it's really the mindset of taking back what has been taken from us. And whatever that looks like for each of us is going to be different. I'm trying not to have any more sorrow-filled holidays, even though it seems like they're still that way. I'm incorporating, okay, that's grief. I have every right to feel that way. I'm just going to go cry for a minute and be sad, and then I'm going to get up and I'm going to cook and I'm going to enjoy my day here on earth with my loved ones and nature and the things that make me happy. So, you know, that's kind of, I don't know, a little roundabout.
Yeah, fantastic, Pamela. And thank you so much. You speak so clearly on this stuff, and I know that's hard won lessons, right?
Yes. And there's no book, like I said, no book on healing and recovery. We all are in charge of mapping it out for each of ourselves. And the good thing is, like, we have the capabilities of finding happiness inside and outside of ourselves, despite our adoption story. It doesn't happen overnight. We have to be easy on ourselves and take it slow and connect with your tribe that speaks the same language and share your heart until your tears start to dry up. And that's my encouragement.
Brilliant. Thanks, Pamela.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. Thank you, Simon. Thanks everybody for listening.
Speak to you very soon. Thanks, listeners. Goodbye.
All right. Bye.